Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you taking time to learn about the Advanced Infrastructure, Energy, and Agriculture Data Explorer tool. My name is Maria Cormier. I'm a researcher at the Community College Research Center. For those of you new to CCRC, welcome. CCRC is a research center at Teachers College, Columbia University that is over 25 years old. In general, our research focuses on building evidence to help colleges improve practice and policy to support stronger educational and workforce outcomes for students. The tool that we're going to share with you today represents a collaborative effort between CCRC and Cameron Sublett at the Foundation for California Community Colleges and his colleagues at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, Vanderbilt University, and Florida State University. I also want to acknowledge CCRC's communications team and Megan Anderson for their invaluable feedback and attention to detail as we put together this tool. I also want to acknowledge our funders, JP Morgan Chase and the National Renewable Energy Lab for their ongoing support and thought partnership. So for today's webinar, I'll begin by giving you a brief overview of the Building Sustainable Futures Initiative. I'll then turn it over to Cameron to discuss the landscape study and the Data Explorer tool. And after Cameron demonstrates the tool for everyone, we will facilitate a panel discussion with Carla Grandi from the California Community Colleges Chancellor's Office and Kate Kinder from the National Council for Workforce Education. And then we'll wrap things up today by sharing a few ways for you all to stay engaged with this really important work. So to begin, in 2023, CCRC launched the Building Sustainable Future Initiative to support efforts by community colleges to recruit and prepare workers for the emerging green economy. At the time, historic federal investments led to predictions of as many as 9 million new jobs that were high quality and aimed at helping communities build new energy infrastructure and respond to challenges posed by climate change. And so while CCRC has a long history in partnering with community and technical colleges, we were relatively new to the sustainability space. And so in many ways, this initiative represents a new novel strand of research focused on understanding how community colleges are helping build a sustainable future, particularly in terms of creating or modifying workforce programs designed to prepare students for jobs in the emerging economy. So we began this work, this initiative, by convening a group of national experts and leaders for one day in the spring of 2024. We brought together community colleges, workforce development organizations, policymakers, and funders to understand existing innovative programs and initiatives, and also to identify unmet needs and opportunities to prepare workers for this sustainable future and emerging economy. Last August, we published a call to action, which Megan is going to put in the chat, that summarizes the themes that emerged in the symposium. It also provides some talking points for colleges and organizations. A key takeaway from that we highlight in this call to action is that community and technical colleges are uniquely positioned to prepare students for good jobs in this emerging economy. It's estimated that over 70% of these jobs won't require a bachelor's degree. Community colleges are widely geographically dispersed, making them accessible to a lot of students, particularly in rural areas, and they're situated to address regional workforce and climate dynamics. Relatedly, workforce development is integral to their missions, which gives them the capacity to be nimble and responsive to emerging training needs. And finally, and importantly, they serve a large proportion of American undergraduates. In particular, the largest proportion of minoritized students, as well as low-income and first-generation students, which means that community colleges have a unique ability to help facilitate an equitable workforce transition. And now I'm going to turn it over to Cameron, who's going to share with you the landscape study as well as the Data Explorer tool. Cameron?
Yes, thank you, Maria, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I have the pleasure of walking you through some fundamental motivations and concepts undergirding this area work. I also have the pleasure of sharing some of our broad takeaways from the landscape scan, and most importantly, I get the honor of introducing you to the Area Data Explorer. So let me back up just a little bit. This work began, as Maria said, in partnership with colleges across the nation, expressing interests in addressing climate change because of the exigencies facing their communities, but also in response to workforce development opportunities ushered in through landmark federal investments such as the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill. But the colleges we spoke with raised questions about how to understand these exigencies. What's happening in their local labor markets? What are or will be the high demand, high value jobs? And what are credentials of value? So, with funding from JP Morgan Chase and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, we launched a national landscape study to understand alignment between occupational demand, measured by job postings, and community college credential completion by region. However, we began this initiative focused exclusively on green jobs. We use the term green jobs exclusively to refer to those jobs traditionally associated with the green economy. But after getting our hands dirty and starting this work, we began to pivot away from this term to a focus on credentials and the related occupations that are impacted by advancements in technology, increased energy demands, and efforts to improve sustainability and efficiency. And so we broadly classified these jobs as advanced infrastructure, energy, and agriculture. We made this pivot for several reasons. First, the political and funding landscape has changed dramatically since we began this work. The federal government is no longer making grants or extending tax credits to support renewable energy, and climate change has become a politically charged issue. Secondly, and equally relevant, is that we found the term to be too narrow, and we felt that it overlooked critical roles where skill sets overlap significantly with sustainability related work. For example, occupations such as solar installers or wind turbine technicians are classic, stereotypical green jobs. But roles like construction managers, electrical line workers, or precision agriculture technicians share many of the same technical competencies and are equally central, we argue, to building the workforce of the future. So, moving on, with our conceptualization of area established, we next proceeded to ask ourselves, well, what are area credentials? What do they look like? And correspondingly, we asked, what are area jobs? And where are those jobs located? So what I'd like to do now is walk you through how we began answering these questions. To answer these questions, we relied on data from several sources. To track area credential completions across community colleges and time, we downloaded and analyzed IPED's directory and completions files from 2010 to the most recent data file of 2023. To track area jobs across US regions and time, we accessed and analyzed Lightcast annual job postings data across the same panel from 2010 to 2023. Importantly, when looking at the Lightcast job postings data, we did so at the county level. But to better account for economic interdependence among counties, we aggregated job postings to commuting zones, which is a framework established by the US Department of Agriculture. Now, additional methodological details behind the area landscape scan and the data explorer are available to those who are interested in it. Later, I'm going to show you where to find these details on the data explorer website. I'll also show you where you can download these data for yourself. This slide right here provides several easily accessible and concrete examples of what we mean when we say area credentials or area jobs. As you can see, area credentials include fields of study, programs like welding, physical sciences, and automotive technology. You can also see that community colleges offer varying award levels within these fields of study, ranging from awards of less than 1 year to associate degrees. You can see in the third column that area jobs closely connected to each of these fields of study. And the next column shows the level of education workers typically need to perform those jobs. In some cases, community college sub-baccalaureate credentials are sufficient. In others, a bachelor's degree might be required for workforce entry. This highlights the importance of both the training and transfer function of community colleges. Importantly, the last column on the far right shows that some of the area jobs identified through our process are considered classical green jobs by ONET's definition. Yet we also see that area jobs include occupations not considered green in the traditional sense. Yet we would argue there's little doubt that automotive mechanics and technicians will be instrumental to advancing the nation's infrastructure and energy economies. So moving on, what I'd like to do now is highlight some of the main findings of our landscape scan. First, what we see from our landscape scan is that in analyzing area jobs, we find that overall area jobs are increasing. As the figure shows, the transportation and material moving category of employment, that's the light blue line, experienced dramatic increase in job postings over the period we analyzed, especially from 2016 through a peak in 2022. But we also see growth across multiple skilled trades. So these include installation, maintenance, repair, personal care and service, architecture and engineering, and construction and extraction occupational categories. They each saw steady or accelerated growth in job postings over the decade. Now, these fields reflect sustained demand for hands-on, infrastructure adjacent, or community serving roles, some of which align with energy, transportation, and public sector investments. Now, moving on to our next finding, we'd like to share that our scan of annual wage data, weighted by employment within occupational categories, reveals that area jobs are good jobs. As you can see, there is in fact a wage premium for sub-baccalaureate area occupations. In other words, jobs requiring less than a bachelor's degree, for these occupations, the average wage is actually higher in area occupations than in non-area occupations. One possible implication may be that area-heavy locales may offer more lucrative middle skill job opportunities, which is especially relevant for community college students and credential-focused programs. Another high-level takeaway from this slide is that wage figures show wage parity at the bachelor's level. As you can see on the right, at the bachelor's degree level, wages are virtually the same across area and non-area categories. We believe this underscores our belief that area jobs are good jobs. And then moving on, the third finding of our landscape scan is that area fields of study embrace diverse credentialing pathways. As you can see, even within the targeted cluster of area academic programs, area fields of study reflect wide variation in educational pathways, from short-term certificates to associate and even bachelor's degrees. This indicates that area is not confined to a single educational level or credential model, but spans a continuum of workforce-aligned training options. If you look further, you can see that hands-on technical fields rely heavily on certificates. This includes fields like transportation and materials moving, precision production, and construction trades. These are all dominated by short-term and long-term certificates with relatively few associate degrees. These sectors are, we would argue, access-friendly and optimized for faster workforce entry, especially via community college and technical training programs. At the same time, the figure illustrates that associate degrees anchor STEM and science fields. For fields like physical sciences, engineering, interdisciplinary studies, associate degrees make up the bulk of the awards, suggesting a more structured or academically scaffolded path. These areas may require more foundational coursework or are commonly linked to transfer pipelines. So what I'd like to do now is take an opportunity to provide you with a live demonstration of the Area Data Explorer. In case any of the landscape study conclusions we've reported here are of interest to you and you'd like to explore further. So please allow me to share my screen. Welcome to the Area Data Explorer. This is the product of a lot of hard work and dedication of me and my team, and I could not be more proud of them. What you'll see is that we have structured your data exploration according to 4 main tabs at the top of the Data Explorer. You begin with the Map tab, the Credentials Awarded tab, the Job Postings tab, and the About tab. Let's begin with the Map tab. As you can see, you're presented a map of the contiguous United States. The red dots on the map are the community and technical colleges spaced across the United States of America. The shading below the red dots corresponds to the commuting zones upon which they are located. Darker shades refer to a greater concentration of area job postings within those commuting zones. And the size of the community college bubble corresponds to the concentration of area degrees awarded at that institution. Importantly, you can zoom in and you can zoom out of the map. You can change by year. And you can also change the shading coloring to move from, for example, the raw number of job postings within a commuting zone to the percentage of area job postings relative to all job postings in that commuting zone. You can even search by a particular community college. For example, I might want to examine Santa Barbara City College. Doing so zooms in on Santa Barbara City College, located on the California coastline. As you can see, in the year 2020, Santa Barbara City College awarded 4,700 credentials. That same year, 698 of them were area credentials, leading to an area percentage rate of roughly 15%. You can back out by hitting the clear button to reset the map. Another way of searching or drilling down on the data we provide on the Map tab is by investigating the different bubbles, the different institutions or community colleges. This particular bubble is quite large relative to the others. Hovering over it reveals that it's Mesa Lands Community College, located in the commuting zone of Las Vegas, New Mexico. And in the year 2020, it had an area credential concentration completion rate of 84%. That's quite high. So maybe you might be interested in exploring, well, what type of degrees is Mesa Lands Community College awarding? Let me then take you to the Credentials Awarded tab, where you'll find answers to those and other questions. On this tab, you're presented with a number of ways to search the data in terms of the credentials awarded by each institution. Remember, we are interested in Mesa Lands Community College. So I just might go to the All Institutions search bar here and quickly search for Mesa Lands Community College. If I click on Mesa Lands Community College, the data update in real time. The first figure shows us a time trend of the area degrees awarded by Mesa Lands Community College in sheer number, but then also as a percentage of total awards given by Mesa Lands Community College. As you can see, Mesa Lands Community College has a concentration rate of area completion that is far higher than the national average. You can hover over a given year for detailed information of the completion rate. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, what are the degrees specifically that Mesa Lands Community College is awarding? You can scroll down further to find answers to that question. As you'll see here, the most common or frequently awarded area degree field of study at Mesa Lands Community College is electromechanical technologies technician, followed by electromechanical and electromechanical engineering technology. Now, you might also have questions about the commuting zones that colleges like Mesa Lands Community College are located around. You can find additional information on the commuting zones in the Job Postings tab. You'll see that you're presented with a similar array of options with which to drill down on the data further. You can search by a given commuting zone. You can even use some of the pre-structured search bars we've provided. For example, this is a list of the descending order of the commuting zones with the highest number of area postings. Los Angeles is number 1. If I click on Los Angeles, you'll see that Los Angeles far outstrips the national average in terms of the number of area jobs posted in the Los Angeles commuting zone. But maybe I wanted to look not by the commuting zone with the highest raw number of job postings. Maybe I wanted to look at the commuting zone with the highest share of area job postings. Well, that is Gilliam County and Wheeler County commuting zone in Eastern Oregon. If I click on that, you'll see that that particular commuting zone in Eastern Oregon has an area job postings rate that's far higher than the national average. Now, you might be interested to know, what are the particular area jobs within that commuting zone that makes it such a standout? You can find answers to those questions by scrolling down below. And you'll see a breakdown of the particular area jobs for which there is an elevated number of job postings in a given year. Unsurprisingly, for this commuting zone, you'll see a good number of job postings for wind turbine service technicians. In fact, this particular commuting zone is home to Shepherd's Flat wind turbine farm. The final tab you'll see on the Area Data Explorer is the About the Data Explorer tab. Here is where you'll find the additional methodological details you might be hungry for. What are area jobs? What are area credentials? How did we locate area credentials and job postings? And then here is the downloadable data files for you to explore on your own time. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to my colleague, Maria.
Thank you, Cameron. And big kudos to you and your team for putting together a really exciting and useful tool for the field. Now we'd like to invite our panelists to join us. We are very fortunate today to have two esteemed colleagues. We have Carla Grandi, Senior Advisor to the Chancellor and Senior Climate Fellow for the California Community College Chancellor's Office. We also have Kate Kinder, Executive Director of the National Council for Workforce Education. Welcome and thank you. So to begin, we'll start with you, Carla. Can you share with us a little bit about how you see community colleges effectively working with local employers and industry to help prepare students for the emerging, changing area jobs?
Thank you. So that's a great question. And I think Cameron just really highlighted the role that community colleges play in terms of the number of jobs that are available to students. So within these green and blue economy or area jobs, there are a majority that do not require a four-year degree. So community colleges are really ideally situated and are the workforce development driver of the nation and of most of our states. And so in California, we're seeing some areas, particularly in the Central Valley, where there are a high concentration of these area jobs. And we have some collaborations in which we have community colleges that are closely working with industry partners, bringing them together at the table, centering the employers and the industry partners to really understand what are the skills that are needed for employees within their area. And then the colleges are working to develop curriculum that meets those needs. And so they are literally overlaying the course outlines of record with the job descriptions in those areas to understand whether the courses that are being taught are actually incorporating the skills that the employers need. And so that's a labor-intensive relationship, but it's really valuable to ensure that the students are successful in the workforce and that the community colleges are preparing students to move into these high-paying jobs of the present and of the future. So that's one example of how that's happening in California.
Thank you, Carla. Any particular examples, any certain areas, industries that stand out to you?
Yeah, so one of the foci in the Central Valley is looking at reskilling fossil fuel workers. And so we're looking at, in Bakersfield area in particular, the fossil fuel industry had been a large part of the economy there. And so now we're looking at how can we train those workers to move into clean energy fields like geothermal or hydrogen. And so really aligning the skills that are common within fossil fuel careers and lining them up with skills that are necessary in like geothermal and hydrogen to be able to transition them into that. So the Kern Community College District has really been a leader in that work within the Central Valley.
Thank you. And Kate, in your role leading a national intermediary organization, what are some examples you're seeing? What are some initiatives out there from that national perspective?
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me today and for this great topic and really powerful tool that will aid colleges and building effective programs. So for those of you who aren't familiar, National Council for Workforce Education is 50 years old, and we support the advancement of workforce education at the nation's community and technical colleges. So I have the privilege to work with many colleges around the country and really see how they are forging those partnerships with industry and with local employers, and then creating programs that map to the needs to really create opportunities for learners. And so those students may be needing to upskill their current jobs, as Carla mentioned, or they are needing to re-career or enter their first job. And so what I've really seen colleges do well in workforce education, and that's that whole gamut of a micro-credential up to an associate's degree, is really look at how do they ensure they are building the skills and then that their credentials validate those competencies that the employers need for the local jobs. And so that is, looking at foundational degrees or certificates like in electrical and mechanical technology. But then as technology and systems rapidly evolve, how do they tweak those so that people have the skills to move up or stay current with the technology that employers are using? And so a good example, building off of the example Cameron shared in Wheeler County, is Columbia Gorge Community College is that local college. And so they have really responded to their local economy and employer needs to build out the skills that students can develop in those industries. And so they certainly prepare people for the wind turbine industry and those jobs in technology, but they also want to ensure that they're responsive. And so when those local jobs are filled, that they prepare students for other jobs too. And so they've really been skillful at listening to employers across industries and seeing, so whether that's aviation or uncrewed aerial devices or wind industry. And so what are those foundational electrical skills or mechanical skills or automation and robotic skill, so that they build those in and really listening to employers and what they need. So I think that's an example in Columbia Gorge Community College. Another great example of how colleges can do this at scale is the Community College Alliance for Agriculture Advancement. And so that is a group of 18 colleges across 16 states that are really looking at what are those, how do they drive innovation, how do they partner with industry, and how do they support learners to have the skills that they need to support sustainable agricultural practices and really strengthen the industry. And so I think that's a great example of how colleges are responding and working at scale to make sure we're really strengthening our food systems, our agricultural practices, that connects to our energy infrastructure. So I think colleges are really responsive, and I think having the data along with those employer relationships is key to making really informed program decisions that then drive the curriculum, that then drive the credentials that are conferred, those industry recognized credentials, and ensure people have pathways to good jobs and economic mobility.
Thanks, Kate, and thank you for sharing those two initiatives. Back in the beginning of our work in this space, we were particularly drawn to the agriculture piece of it. And I'm wondering if you can share some examples, different programs within the agriculture space that you're hearing about, and what might be valuable for others out there to hear about.
Yeah, sure. So I think, as part of the lead college for that Community College Alliance for Agriculture is Northeast Community College in Nebraska. And I had the privilege of doing a site visit there. So got to see they have a working farm on site. And so they give students those work-based learning opportunities. They set up internships. And so they're looking at what are those sustainable practices? How can they look at food and feedstock innovations, different biofuel practices, biomechanicals, and then also, they have a wind energy farm there, if that's partly also what, the farm wants to do to provide things. What are different urban agricultural practices or limited space to support those efforts? So I think it's just really looking at they're looking at different water management and how they do that and make that more effective. And so I think it's kind of looking at scale of what are the new technologies, what takes care of the land, and what honors the knowledge that farmers in that region have had for decades, but then harnessing new technologies too as climates evolve and change.
Thank you. It sounds like a nice example of just sort of the interdisciplinary skills that are needed going forward. So as Cameron discussed, we pivoted to using this framework, this area framework, to describe emerging jobs and the emerging economy. And we wanted to take advantage of having the two of you as leaders and experts in this space to hear what your thoughts are, your feedback on this framework. Does it resonate with you? Is this something you think makes sense for the field to kind of latch on to? And where do you see kind of opportunity for us to improve upon on this framework? And so, Carla, we'll start with you.
Great, thank you. Yes, I think that this is a really exciting tool. I think one of the things that I have seen as I'm talking to colleges both across, in California, we have 116 community colleges. So we're the largest higher education institution in the country, and I think the second largest in the world. So we have a lot of colleges, and a lot of regional diversity. And so I think one of the things that we see as we're talking to colleges about expanding their green and blue workforce opportunities for students is just a lack of knowledge of the different opportunities that exist. And I think part of that is because these industries are evolving so quickly. And so we are trying to do work with communities to help communities, families, students, and also the colleges understand what are these careers that exist and are emerging, and what are how many jobs are they highly paid, et cetera. And so I think that this is a really exciting snapshot that is easily digestible and will help colleges and communities to understand the different opportunities that exist. Within colleges where we have counselors or academic advisors, I think this is also a really valuable tool for them because they're trying to understand the different workforce opportunities and how to advise students in terms of their area of study. And so I think that this is a really digestible way for them to understand the opportunities that exist in their regions. Most of our community college students are place-bound. They're not interested in relocating. And so understanding what are the career opportunities within their communities is really important. And the other piece of that is as colleges are developing these programs, they need to have some reassurance that there are jobs that students are going to be able to move into. And so that's one of the major things that colleges are looking at as they begin to develop new programs in green and blue economy jobs. And so being able to look at this tool and have that as a resource, I think, is really important.
Thank you. And in terms of sort of the framing, does that resonate with you, that referring to these jobs as advanced infrastructure, energy, agriculture jobs? Is there another term you think that would better capture that full range? You know, I think an important point of Cameron's was that specificity, right? Anything there stand out to you, Carla, in terms of the actual framing around these jobs and programs?
I mean, I think I appreciate the framing of it and the specificity. One of the conversations that we've had in California when we talk about green and blue economy jobs, some people come back with like, we don't quite understand what that means. And I think that having it more specifically called out that these are the sectors that we're talking about, and also the focus on the agriculture, things that people have a clear understanding of already, I think is really beneficial in terms of educating communities about these different opportunities. And so I think that it's great if we can all align around one terminology or one acronym, because I think it does confuse the conversation a little bit when we're using of different ways of talking about the same thing. But I like this framing of it, that it's, it has a nice acronym and it's also specifically calling out the fields that we're talking about. So I think that that's really helpful.
Thanks, Carla. And Kate, how about you? In what ways does this framing resonate with what you're hearing and seeing? And what are some of the kind of specific, particular ways you can imagine colleges, employers, other organizations using this tool?
Yeah, I'll start with that because I really think there's so much evolving in higher education right now and really shifting rapidly and increasing attention on needing to understand the value of higher education and really how to quantify that. And so I think the more democratization of data we can have, the better. And that's for policymakers to make it easy and clear the ROI and impact and value of community colleges, higher ed leaders, and then also those all college staff and faculty. So if you're working with students, how do you know if that's a good job? And then our community members, so employers making sure they can see, does this align with what you're seeing in your industry, families and students. So I think figuring out a way to get access to that information as simply as possible is really important. So that people can make good determinations for their futures and investments and know what credential will lead to a good job and those pathways for advancement. So I think that's a key piece here. I know when I've built programs in the past, when I worked at a college for a long time, it used to have to be like going to LightCast, which was burning class at the time, and our labor data and the employers and this. And trying to ensure I align this. So I think anything that combines all these different data sources you have is amazing, and the ability to drill in and out. And I think it's particularly timely with the passage of Workforce Pell and that implementation coming, which is going to be for shorter term programs and needing to show that there is a good job that's related and look at the data related to that. It really aligns with national policy efforts around more performance-based funding, right? And so you look at House Bill 8 in Texas, which is about really valuing outcomes. And Texas is a leader in renewable energy. And so you think about on the college level, just having this as a tool to be able to drill in and show that and validate and know what those credentials of value are is really important. So I think from that standpoint, just understanding what jobs are available is important. And I do think, I certainly don't have the answer of the ideal framing, but I like for the area framing, I think it's key because it speaks to how these skills and these technologies cross industries and jobs. And so that was a couple years ago when I was working on some projects. One of the difficulties is looking at all the SIP and SOC codes. It was like the crosswalk was insane to capture everything, right? And in a lot of these programs, there might be some element that is for renewable energy or clean. So, you know, an automotive technician, as was coming up before, being able to work on EV vehicles is going to be really key in the future. And traditionally powered, you know, gas vehicles. And so how do you make sure you capture all those jobs? Same with HVAC. You need to be able to work on traditional air conditioning and natural gas systems, and heat pumps are going to be really key. And so how do we integrate these key skills that allow people to evolve in the field as technology and industries evolve? And so I think that's other great thing, is trying to simplify and make sure people understand that really this is about responding to what our economy needs, what our communities need, and what workers need to have good jobs, to really have a strong energy infrastructure, agriculture and food systems, a sustainable and resilient grid, and the different transportation options we need. So I think as much as possible to really illustrate that as what this is about, and creating those pathways is key.
Thank you both for the feedback. I'm sure we'll be getting more feedback with the release of the tool. So appreciate your initial thoughts. So we're starting to get some questions in the chat. I'll share one from Jeff Friels. His question is, how will changes to federal policy on renewable energy, sustainable technology, et cetera, impact programming in these areas? If we invest in those areas, will we get the rug pulled out from under us? And related to that, what's the best way to proceed, assuming that federal grants probably will not be forthcoming?
I can take a stab at that. And just, I will say that I'm coming from a slightly different reality being in California, because in California, a lot of the funding from the state has gone towards clean energy, green and blue economy area work. And there has really been a recognition at the state level from the governor's office and also from the legislature that we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and also that this is the future, the present and the future of our economy in California, you know, between agriculture, clean energy, et cetera. There are a lot of jobs and the future jobs within this area. And so there has continued to be state funding for these types of programs. But we are also seeing some of our colleges in particular who are losing their federal grants that they had for some of these programs. And so I think that there's really the need at this point in time for us to focus on the benefits to the economy and to into employment of our students. And so all of these programs that we're talking about, while they're good for the environment, they are also good for the economy and are allowing our students to move into these jobs. And so I think a lot of it, and a lot of the conversations that we've been having at the national level have to do with the framing of it. And so I don't think there's an easy solution right now, but I think that I'm not as worried because I feel like there's a lot of momentum behind this work already, and particularly within the private sector, there's a lot of recognition that we need to be moving in the direction of educating people for these clean energy jobs. So for example, I am at the Future Summit in California right now, and we're talking about AI. And the conversation is around how do we produce enough clean energy to be able to power the data centers and this AI infrastructure. And so there's really, I think within the private sector, there's this recognition that this is the direction that we need to be going in. So even if we're losing federal funding from the government, I'm hopeful that that will be replaced by funding from the private sector that understands that this really is the direction that we need to be heading in. So that is a slightly skewed California perspective,
Yes.
as I recognize.
Yes, always good to get the West Coast perspective. Thank you, Carla. Kate, anything to add to that?
I guess I would just say, I think if we look at economically what's happening in states and regions, I think this is going to continue to be important. And certainly federal funding helps with innovation and sport. But I think efforts are continuing to happen around this work. And I think, it takes different forms, but really looking at how does it meet the needs of industry who put forth large investments in some of these technologies or wanting to make their practices more sustainable. I think a good example of some work that's happening is in Louisiana with the fuel initiative. And so future use of energy Louisiana. And so they're really looking at how they can, Louisiana is one of the top energy producers in the nation. And so they're looking at how can they do more carbon recapture and do those technologies. They do work with our colleges and into their K-12 to get students aware of the STEM careers that can drive innovation of the energy field. I was at Nunez Community College outside of New Orleans recently, and they were talking about just how their students are really interested in how do they, strengthen their energy and diversify their energy systems, and how do they protect their coastlines. So I think it's looking at on a local level, a lot of work is continuing in state and regional. And so thinking about where are those federal investments currently or not, but really making sure it is clear it's about strengthening our economy and creating opportunities for workers.
Thank you. So, as Cameron featured for everyone, the tool has a tab that you can go to look at job postings. And the map on the landing page shows job postings and then credentials awarded, right? So it starts to get at this idea of alignment between credentials and job postings. I was wondering, Kate, you mentioned earlier outreach to students as part of this fuel initiative. Can you both speak to how you see colleges doing outreach, conducting recruitment into these programs, and within communities about area jobs, and how colleges can prepare students for these jobs? And what challenges do you think colleges may be facing when they're recruiting students into these programs?
I can start with the challenges piece because that's something that's near and dear to my heart. So one of the challenges of recruiting students into these programs is really that they don't know about them. So students, their parents, their community members don't necessarily know about these jobs because they are new. And so colleges do a lot of work with career fairs, going into high schools, working with high school counselors to try to educate them about these programs. And I think that that's something in California that we're focusing more on is how do we go out into communities and educate communities about these jobs, but also about climate change and the impacts of climate change in general. So just to throw some statistics out there, in California, about 65% of our students are classified as low income, and about 75% come from communities of color. And so those communities are disproportionately impacted by climate change. And in a lot of the rural areas in particular, there are many of the jobs, or a high proportion of the jobs, that are in these area fields. And so helping the communities to understand that these jobs exist, I think, is really the first step in being able to bring them in. And so that is a lot of the work that we're doing. Also working with, we talked about displaced workers. Another effort that we have underway is trying to award credit for prior learning for students who are transitioning from one field to another to try to, make that transition faster and recognize the skills that they've already built and the work that they've already done in fields or in the military, and help them to transition more quickly into these high-paying jobs within the green and blue economy area. So I hope that answered that question.
Thank you. That was a very useful example. Kate, any examples you can think of that you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things is the workforce side of the house, whether that's non-credit or credit, that's different at each college, what that means, but I think have traditionally been really effective at doing outreach to both employers for opportunities to upskill their incumbent workers and to adult learners. And so I think it's really ensuring strengthening those partnerships with CBOs or with different programs that are serving adults and ensuring they know that there are job opportunities. And I think making sure that students also know like these programs prepare you best to advance in your career and cross several different jobs. I think traditionally before it was like, we are preparing you for X job and you go to this field. And then when that job goes away, people are feeling like they have to start over again. And so really explaining this is a different approach that ensures you don't have to start over, that you have skills that cross industries, that meet the needs of new technology, and you have pathways for lifelong learning, which I think is really critical for students to know. I think, a good example, I was reading something at Central New Mexico where a student was talking about having worked in many low-wage jobs and really just needing to have a more sustainable career path. And so enrolled in their technology program that has the solar, I'm forgetting the word, but the certification to be able to install solar panels, which is a big emerging career in New Mexico. But then it was kind of like, and if that changes and that slows down, I can be, everyone needs an electrician and I'll have those same skills. So I think it's also mapping it that way. Like this gives you lots of options to have stability and be able to take care of your family and have good jobs in your community.
Thank you. So we're coming up on time, and I just wanted to give both of you an opportunity to preview some of the upcoming initiatives and events you have related to the emerging economy. We have C3 Converge and the NCWE conference coming up. So Carla, did you want to just share a little bit about what's happening in California in the next month?
Yes, thank you. So in California, in Anaheim, we are going to be hosting the C3 Converge Community College Climate Summit. That's September 29th and 30th. It will focus on climate action across community colleges from the workforce development perspective, community engagement, curriculum integration, and facilities and operations. So kind of all of the ways that community colleges are engaged in climate action. It's a 2-day summit. We will have heavily focused on California, but also bringing in folks from across the nation to talk about the work that they're doing. And I just saw it pop up in the chat. It starts on a Monday, so it's a great opportunity to come to Disneyland for the weekend and then to the conference. So thank you.
And Kate, do you want to share a little bit about your upcoming conference?
Sure, thank you. So we have our annual conference coming up October 7th through 9th in Norfolk, Virginia. It's a really great conference that is very practitioner focused. So we look at both the visionary ideas and then the tactics to achieve them. So we have certainly some information about the different area jobs and pathways and programs there, some panel from California. And then also just really looking at apprenticeship. What are competency-based learning? What are these different ways that we can get increased college access and students accelerate their pathways to and through college into good jobs? So really excited about that. So please consider joining us.
Anything exciting in Norfolk? No Disneyland there.
No, but we are at a fantastic hotel that's really great, and right on the waterfront. So there's a lot going on there. So
Great.
Not sure we can compete with Disneyland, but.
Well, thank you both of you for joining us and sharing your insights and your experiences and providing us with some very, I think, concrete examples to think about. So really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for doing this really great work. It's really powerful, and just I think continuing to move this work forward is really important right now.
Yeah, great.
Nice, thank you.
All right. So to wrap things up, we wanted to share with you the website in which the Explorer tool is housed, and you can find it at CCRC, our main website there. There's a link there. It also exists as an app as well, so you can access it via the website or via the app. And we welcome feedback. We encourage you to explore and get in there and test out the different tabs, and please share your thoughts, share ways that you think we can build upon this. We really see this as just the beginning of building out a really valuable tool for the field. And then finally, we have a few outreach and dissemination activities coming up. As we mentioned, the C3 Converge conference. We'll also be participating in Climate Week NYC, as well as APAM for you policy folks out there. We are also in the process of publishing a research brief that will highlight some of the key findings Cameron shared, as well as a few others, and again, preview the tool in that brief. So please look out for that. That will be published this fall. And then finally, we encourage you to take a look at our blogs. We have a fabulous series that's kind of focusing on a webinar series being supported by the Foundation for California Community Colleges, as well as other blog posts out there. And we will be posting the Data Explorer tool in a blog next week. Thank you, everyone. Take care.